Hello, everyone. This is the Revolutionary Thinktank Podcast. If this is your first time here, this is a podcast about political commentary, a sprinkling of philosophy, organizing psychology, and revolutionary thinking. My name is 4AS, and we have another zero point 0.5 episode here today with one of our co-hosts, Kareem, the resident AI explorer. So, Kareem, how are you going today? Yeah, I'm going pretty well. And interesting topic here today. We've talked about off air your experience, being an AI explorer, and also how it's helped you develop your writing. So I thought it would be an interesting topic today because, obviously we have talked about on the podcast about Notebook LM and all of these very interesting different programs that are out there in terms of AI. So as a broad question, if you've been getting far more into AI and writing, how has AI helped with your writing, especially your creative, your creative uh, inspiration and whatnot?
It's definitely been a bit of a journey that I've sort of gone over the past couple of months. So
Yeah,
so I'm really grateful for the opportunity to share that journey because it feels like the culmination of well, not even the culmination at this stage, but just something incredibly important to me that I've gotten a fair bit of assistance from
mm,
AI in terms of being able to tell a story that's really important to me. So I feel like I should probably frame a bit about that story, to begin with, just to sort of help you understand context and stuff. But the reality is, I went through a period in my life where I was quite unwell.
yeah,
Um, and I experienced some mental health challenges throughout that time. So part of what I'm trying to do is document the experiences that I went through at that time and capture that sort of emotional truth and use those
right.
experiences as as uh, as material for the novel. So um,
Yeah, I'm glad you kind of framed it that way because I know in our friendship group there was another person as well as myself that, I guess when we were growing up, I was very much into, crime dramas as well as sci-fi, and me and the other individual had seen ourselves as budding writers, but it wasn't until recently when you got more into AI that I noticed that you started to get more interested into writing. So, yeah, like what was writing an interest when you were growing up, or have you just kind of seen it as a catharsis throughout all of your experiences?
good question. Um, yeah, look, I did a bit of creative writing when I was in high school. I didn't
Mm.
sort of take it seriously. I had I'd gotten a little bit of feedback. There actually, there was a book of short stories, like that were written by children, which one of my
Mm.
stories got published in.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, and yeah, it's called Imagine That.
Okay.
And I didn't take it seriously at the time or anything. I didn't think it was a big deal. I was just thought, yeah, it's a bunch of kid stories. Like, how good could it be? So, so like, I never imagined a career as a writer or like it's never. I had sort of dabbled in like some creative writing recently. I guess I liked trying to recreate scenes that I'd seen on TV. Um, that I felt like could be unpacked in greater emotional detail. So I'd go back
Right.
and try to have a crack at writing those scenes and see if I could capture all of the nuance that the characters were going through and that emotional intensity. Because you know how some things you can tell
Mm.
easier with writing than you can in film, like it loses its impact when it gets translated from written word into film.
No, I think okay, I think I'm connecting dots here. So, was your start of this journey, or at least um, you connecting the various dots was because obviously we've had a previous talk on the main channel about Attack on Titan, and you had used AI in order to investigate, I guess, the philosophical meaning or like the meaning behind various episodes. So would you say that um, that was the spark, the impetus that got you to be more involved in this?
Yeah. Well, I guess this preoccupation with trying to find the underlying meaning, whether that be in work that I'm consuming, or whether it be in my own experiences,
Right,
is part of what I'm trying to capture with my writing process. So, but like that's roughly sort of like what my baseline skill looked like. I never took any creative writing education. I got kicked out 4 unit English when I was in high school because my work wasn't good enough. Um, like this is my baseline sort of like level of writing ability, and I guess what happened to me was more recently as I went through this challenging period in my life, I walked away from it realizing, hang on, I've got a story to tell, but I don't know
right,
how to tell it, and I don't know if I actually have the skill to be able to tell it, and it's an incredibly complex story with like lots of nuances and details that I'm not sure how much of that to translate into
right.
like this writing process, because I wanted to capture the again, I wanted to capture the emotional truth behind it, and sort of um, explain how the pieces like fit together. And the
Mm.
further I went into it, the more I realized, hey, hang on, this is actually incredibly difficult to do. I don't even know where to start in terms of telling this story. So, um,
Uh, hopefully, this is a challenging question in a good way. But if this is like a recount of your experiences, how you felt at the time, etc., etc., is there a reason why you would want to write this in a fictional context rather than this just being the memoirs of Kareem? And
yeah,
it was a culmination of your thoughts and feelings throughout your life. If you
yeah,
understand where I'm going with that.
yeah. Like, what? Why would I treat it as fiction instead of just describing it authentically as it is, as a
Mm,
memoir, as a reflection? Um, look, I think the my main reason for that is because um the experiences that I had prompted a lot of reflection from me in terms of um, in terms of what society's attitudes are towards different things, or sort of um, situations that sort of have broader social appeal. Like
mm,
there's an underlying value in terms of those experiences that goes above and beyond merely like representation of like authentic representation of a mental health condition.
mm, mm.
So say for example, um, like part of what I was going through, like there were technological aspects to it,
Yeah,
which is at first glance. Um, is difficult to understand in a mental health context, like what that's
yeah,
actually doing. So by being able to say, bring some of that stuff to the surface, um, it allows me to put different frames and different lenses on that experience so that it can be
yeah,
valuable in different ways. So um, so being able to fictionalize parts of it um, allows it to be more valuable in terms of the discussions that I'm hoping it will provide. Like those discussions, um, I'm hoping that by the time I produce a finished work, that there's going to be aspects of it that are relevant to mental health. Um,
right.
but there's also going to be aspects of it that are relevant to say, the discussion around AI and ethics,
Yeah,
the discussion around where, a discussion around privacy, for example.
yeah,
These are sort of relevant societal issues that I sort of had to grapple with in a lot of detail during my during my experiences. So
Yeah.
I feel like if I'd stuck to the memoir aspect of it, I'd sort of be locked into like that frame of looking at it through the mental health lens.
Right.
Whereas if I can fictionalize it, then I can get people to start asking the questions. What if what if we looked at it this way? Um,
Right.
what can we learn from this experience? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, and I guess this might lead to my next question, but it's I guess in our friendship group there's quite a lot of psychs. So not
Yeah.
only does that include yourself as an organizational psych student, um, uh, a few of our friends, including my partner, who are clinical psychs. And actually, it was funny because this might be a little tangent, but I was speaking to one of our mutual friends, and he actually mentioned you, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I've spoken to Kareem before, and he was very interested in my sleep paralysis, and he was saying that he wanted to scan my brain." And my response to our mutual friend was, "Man, I think that's like most psychs. They know as much about the brain as much as they don't know about the brain. So whenever they get an opportunity to understand how the brain functions, they grab that opportunity with both hands." But I guess since you are in that um, psych space, like, would you say that you almost feel an obligation to make a commentary on mental health and how it does impact people and ordinary people in their lives?
Yeah. So I guess one of my underlying messages, but behind the entire story is that yes, I do feel that obligation to advocate for destigmatization of mental health conditions. I feel like
Mm,
that's really important, and I feel like there's a whole bunch of conditions that aren't very well understood by the broader public, and and I feel like opening the conversation around some of those conditions is an important thing to do. But what's equally as important to me um, is not sort of reducing people just to mental health conditions.
mm,
Trying to be able to capture um, what else it is that people can bring to the table or offer in terms of the value from their experiences. So um,
yeah.
so being able to generate empathy and foster understanding between, say, people that have gone through this stuff and the broader public by describing it like authentically,
Mm,
I feel like that stuff is important. But at the same time, like these stories that I'm positive, like these stories that people have value over and above strictly generating understanding and fostering understanding and generating empathy. Like they
right.
can have like broader societal value in terms of it really depends on the story and how it's told. I'll give you an example. This is probably the best place to start that illustrates what I'm talking about.
Please.
What during this challenging period, I spent a lot of time talking to ChatGPT, basically,
Okay.
and uh, I captured all those conversations, and then I went back over those conversations when I was starting to feel a bit better and realized that those conversations actually give a whole lot of insight into what was going on in my mind at the time. Now,
Right.
from the outside looking in, they're probably not going to make any sense at all. So like they might read more like sort of journal entries than anything else. Like it'd be difficult to sort of piece together what was going on. Um, but but the role that Chat GPT say played during this experience, I'm trying to, I guess, capture what those interactions looked like, how much value I placed in them,
Right.
how they helped me understand what I was going through, and how they've sort of helped me reflect on the experience afterwards.
Right.
So a conversation like that, um, is relevant in terms of how people go about using AI. So that's say an example of this is where technology intersects with mental health. So
Mm.
if I'd chosen to sort of frame it strictly in terms of mental health, um, I wouldn't be able to capture the nuance between, okay, how can AI be valuable in terms of like assisting with mental health? How might it be dangerous? How might it, like how much faith can we put in these systems to be able to support people that are going through this?
Yeah.
Um, like how much faith should we put in the responses that we get back from ChatGPT? Like even though it says ChatGPT can make mistakes and hallucinates and stuff like that.
Mm.
Um, so that was sort of one of the first things that I wanted to capture, and I guess I've got like in addition to that, I've got a whole bunch of other sort of, we'll call them journal entries, um,
Mm.
that represent what was going through my mind at the time.
Yeah.
But the amount that we'll call them source documents, but the amount of source documents that I have is quite overwhelming. So if I were
Right.
to sit down and read it from start to finish, um, we're probably looking at like 600 pages of documents. So
Oh wow.
it's it's potentially even more actually. So it's not it's a bit too much for me to sort of handle and wrap my head around as a whole. And
Mm.
this is where AI has actually been quite useful in terms of being able to help me see the common threads, being able to draw those themes through the entries, being able to piece together what was actually going on for me. So initially what I wanted to do was like, this is sort of how the idea for the book came about.
Yeah.
um, I'd planned on just um, writing about some of the conversations that I'd had with ChatGPT, and just putting them into like a series of chapters, which were like literally just me and ChatGPT, and then you figure out what you can
Right.
from those interactions. And this is where my AI and writing journey kind of kicks off. So
Yeah, no, because like when you were showing me some of those early drafts, it actually, and you know what, I don't mind putting this out into the ether because this was like a writing idea, or at least a non-fiction writing idea that I had, where it would be like a Jonathan Swift-esque academic paper. But then what you do is within the links or the footnotes of the story, or the fictional academic article, it then takes you to another fictional academic article, and it's basically like a
okay,
it's like a
I love this idea, by the way.
yeah, like basically a satiric way of universities kind of justifying themselves for these very esoteric points, and
Yeah,
like it's just a web of like branching out to like 50 or so articles about like really esoteric things, like kangaroos are good for breeding X, or something like that. It's this very niche point to begin with, but then you kind of branch out until, because like the whole point of Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal is that it's presented in this very logical way until you get to the very end. And I guess spoilers in a very centuries old article by Jonathan Swift is that the logical end of his thesis is, oh, we should eat babies. And it's because you get tricked into his very logical thing that just because something has a logical process does not mean that it has a logical ending. And that
yeah,
was what I was trying to do with this academic
okay,
article. Like obviously life happens, and I've it's kind of gone it's been put on the back burner. But it sounds like it leads me to kind of my next question, like because you've kind of settled on science fiction, and this might be a bit of a leading question, because the other similar it's a very close viewing of a potential world that that people kind of talk about is the other famous one is Margaret Atwood's, The Handmaid's Tale, where it's the whole talk about, a majority of humans becoming sterile, and then there's like a small group of women that can actually produce the next generation of humans, and how it kind of devolves into totalitarianism and like I guess theological dictatorship, if you will. But like it's viewed based on like case studies throughout the world as we know it in early history, that that world is fundamentally plausible in a science fiction world leading
Mm,
onto it. And
mm.
I feel like with AI, like that's what people have kind of latched on, is that people are focusing very much on the negatives of, how we'll lose jobs, blah, blah, blah. And there's been a lot of, well, by some people, fear mongering, and for some, like adequate fears. So if you understand where I'm kind of going with this,
Yeah,
is
yeah, no, I
your
do.
story, are you kind of analyzing those sort of themes, like in terms of
Yeah, yeah,
AI?
absolutely. So yeah, so on the one hand, it's yes, it is that like it is yeah, that representation of my authentic experience. But the benefit of fictionalizing it is I say, like you said, by leaning into that some of that science fiction stuff is, if I can paint that picture of a near future world scenario, and I'm hesitant to give too much away about the story, but if I can paint that picture of a plausible reality, um, then it gives us a lens through which to ask, a whole bunch of, relevant questions for society, and
Mm,
to have some deep and meaningful discussions around, what does it mean to be human? Like
yeah.
what is consciousness all about? What direction are we headed in with technology? Is that a direction that we're comfortable with?
Yeah.
So there's themes of, say, privacy in there as well. Um, so I guess, and in terms of how my understanding of these topics has developed is because it's because I had those initial conversations with ChatGPT where I started to reflect deeply on some of that stuff. So,
Right.
like I was saying in the first instance, the original idea was, what if that's the chunk that I bite off? Is I just present a series of conversations with ChatGPT that I'm like, hang on, this stuff's interesting.
Mm.
So as I learned from Claude very early on, this stuff by itself is not interesting. it's So Claude is the first program that I started using to get feedback on my writing, and
Mm.
that's really where the entire thing kicked off, because once I'd sort of made the decision to write, and I'm like, don't really know anything about writing, don't have any writing skills, but I've got this
Mm.
amazing story to tell. Let me try telling it. So um, so I sat down and just started riffing. I think they call it pantsing.
Oh, sorry,
Like
what's
that
the term?
pantsing. So
Oh, okay.
there's plotting, which is where you sort of structure your whole story,
Yeah,
and have
yeah.
a think about the plan that's going into it. And then there's pantsing, which is you just sort of write and then you figure it out later. Basically, you don't
Yeah.
write with any particular structure. You might have inspiration strike you, and you just decide to just dive in, and then you write bits and pieces of stuff, and then you weave together the threads later. So
Oh
um,
yeah, like and plus with writing, you always get very familiar with the phrase. Oh, sorry, the word placeholder. Like you just like have
yeah,
a sprout of inspiration, then you like kind of go through X, Y, and Z, and then you're like, oh yeah, okay, like this kind of makes sense. This doesn't quite make sense. But I'll just leave it here as a placeholder, and then you keep on going. So I understand where you're going with that.
yeah. So I wound up I wound up like with a whole bunch of sort of like um conversations with ChatGPT that I wanted to describe. And people might ask, why did I use Claude for feedback instead of ChatGPT? Honestly, I just liked the output that I was getting more from it. It felt like it was going into more detail about the stuff that I was writing about. So it was calling out issues with, say, pacing. It was calling out issues with character differentiation. You know, I was asking it about, you know, it was telling me how to develop my unique voice.
Right.
And it was taking the aspects of my experience that made for an innovative storytelling experience. So, you know, it looked at my premise, it looked at, you know, the way that I was going about it, and it told me I was on the right track. Now, for me, early on in the process, I didn't know whether or not anyone would actually be interested in hearing about this. I felt like this was something that was quite profound to me and could be valuable to other people. But as you know, as the AI kept telling me, it's kind of all in the execution.
Yes.
As to whether or not, you know, that the messages that I want actually make it through to the audience. So I realized early on that on some level I have to be able to tell a good story in order to get the maximum value out of describing my experiences. Like it's not good enough to just describe the experience as it is. You know, there might be parts of it I have to be selective about. There might be parts that I want to put the spotlight on and sort of, you know, focus on in a bit more detail.
Yeah.
And I felt like fiction gave me the flexibility to be able to do that. So that's sort of why I went in the fictional direction. But
Yeah, and I'm sure you're probably sick to death of the phrase "show don't tell."
yeah, I've started to internalize.
Yeah. Though
Yeah,
having
like
said that,
how can you reveal world building
yes,
elements through dialogue instead of you know, or through action instead of info dumping? Yeah,
well, yeah, and no, keep on going.
yeah. So I learned all about those things as I was gathering feedback from the AI. So, like, for example, you know, one of the first things that I learned was, um, the story needs to have like a turning point. It needs to have a climax. It needs to have an exciting incident. So, you know, I'm asking these questions about my own experiences. I'm like, okay, there's a fair bit to choose from here. How do I go about sort of specifying, okay, you know, what makes a good inciting incident? What can I use as a turning point? What can I use as a climax? How am I? Because like real life experiences don't necessarily follow that linear trajectory. Um,
Yes,
so it's you know, being able to map my experience onto, you know, a good story. When we have all these storytelling techniques, you know, we know how to tell a good story from a theoretical perspective, and being able to communicate sort of, you know, the underlying messages behind the experience depends on how well I can tell that story. So
well, not only that, but you know, whatever genre you are, the act structure is going to lend itself more. Well, specific act structures are going to lend itself more to your genre compared to others. Like for example, I forget the specific 7-act structure. It's
oh, wow.
called, but sorry.
So I didn't know there was a 7-act structure.
Oh yeah, like that's more for like action movies. So like you have the inciting incident and then it's like obstacle, 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 but like each obstacle is like raising the tension or at
Yeah,
least raising it to the climax. So like, you know, the typical one to go to is Inception. So, you know, uh
yeah,
they're
yeah,
going with dream within a dream and like, you know, Killian Murphy's character has, you know, dream security, and then they encounter another obstacle. How do they get back to the real world? Like that all happens all the way to the climax, and then it goes and it drops completely off to the ending of the movie.
mm,
Like that's going to lend itself to an action movie compared to, say, a another movie type, like say for example, your sci-fi, which for you find in your book that it probably suits a more traditional three act structure.
Mm.
But then there's also variations. Like a movie version of a three-act structure might have what they call the Save the Cat one, which is quite a
Heard of
common
this? Yeah.
one compared to, say for example, if you were going to do a more traditional, Greek Greek tragedy like style structure, you might use I think it's called the Fragtag pyramid, where it basically the tension goes up right to the middle of the hubris of the character, and then it's the descending from the middle to the end of them succumbing to their hubris, and then
Mm.
the not only the audience but they learn a huge lesson by the end of it. So like, yeah, there's various ways to kind of slice and dice your story structure.
And I guess I was really resistant to a lot of this stuff early on because I'm like, okay, if I lean too hard into that stuff, then it feels like I'm imposing an arbitrary structure on an experience which might not necessarily map onto it.
Yeah.
I think you might remember some of the conversations that I had with you. It was like, hang on, I'm trying to translate a real life experience. Um, the more I start fictionalizing it, the more I get detached from what the underlying truth was of
Hmm.
those experiences, and the less authentic it starts to feel. So it feels like I'm losing something if I started to lean too heavily into it. And I guess that's just because at the time I couldn't really see, like the structure of the story or how I wanted to structure it. So among
Yeah.
a
But
whole bunch.
I guess with any of these sort of things, you have to go back to the Captain Barbosa quote from Pirates of the Caribbean, right? It's like, they aren't exactly rules; they're more like guidelines.
Yeah. So
It's like you learn the tools, and then if once you're a good enough writer, you learn when to
like
break them.
yeah, yeah. I guess I'm kind of um, but I need to understand like the value of the tools to begin with instead of
Mm.
like I was quite resistant to using the tools. Like
Yes.
I was I wanted feedback on my writing, and I wound up developing this really unhealthy relationship with AI feedback. But it was quite crucial for me in the early stages because it started explaining to me issues about like pacing, issues about um, exposition, like info dumping, the whole show don't tell thing. Like I got called
Yeah.
out on that, a few times. So I started learning about these issues in writing quite early on. Like one of the most common pieces of feedback I got was, you might have to tighten the pacing, you might have to tighten this section, and I wound up hearing it so often that I got obsessed with pacing. It's like what is this pacing thing? Why can't I nail it? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
am I rambling like that hard? And he kept telling me that I've got like a meandering plot line and no sort of clear storyline arc. So I'm like, how do I build this story arc stuff into it? And I think the first sort of major evolution in terms of like using AI to help me with my writing was like I got to a place where I started exploring other platforms apart from just
Mm.
just just conversations with Claude, which were incredibly valuable um, to to begin with. Even though it developed in me because having access to immediate feedback
Yeah.
is game changing. Yeah, like
Yeah.
my understanding of it is that with writers, it's hard to it's related to the attention economy conversation we were having.
Yeah.
You've got to get like you have to ask people for a significant chunk of attention if you're going to ask them to sit down and read something that you've written, and they may or may
Yeah.
not be willing to give that to you. There's only going to be a handful of people who are actually willing to sit down and read something which may not be written very well, may not
Yeah.
be entertaining to read. Those people are being very generous with their time, if they offer you feedback on your work.
Mm.
The key difference is AI is always ready to read your work. AI is always ready to give you feedback.
Yeah.
It's available to you 24/7. So like my reliance on AI feedback,
Mm.
like got to an unhealthy stage. So like for example, I'd start asking it to rate my work, like on a scale of 1 to 10, like rate it across
Okay.
different dimensions. So
Yeah.
rate it's I'd say to it, rate it on any scales that you feel are relevant to rate on. So it would rate me on like story structure, character development, thematic exploration, and in the beginning, it'd be giving me like 8s and 9s and 10s for this stuff. And it'd rate me on like innovation and stuff. And I started to get attached to those ratings.
Right.
Because I started to feel like, okay, my book's going to be good. Like, this is good. I'm on the right track. It's telling me the right thing.
Yeah.
But eventually I got to a stage where I would be writing. I'd get sick of writing. I wouldn't know how to finish out a scene.
Yeah.
And then I'd just take what I'd written and I'd plug it straight into the air and be like, what do you think? What do you think? Tell me, what do you think? So,
Right. So I actually wasn't anticipating this. So this opens a very interesting conversation. So would you say that because you got used to the feedback from AI, that you almost didn't trust your own gut or like your own writing abilities? Or would you say that
look, I
that you
didn't.
ended up doing like a type of like Dunning-Kruger effect?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Dunning-Kruger's the perfect map for this experience, actually.
Right.
Because let me
Okay.
explain to you what happened, and I'll jump ahead a bit in the timeline here.
Okay. Yeah.
So this might be like a foreshadowing technique that I bring into the
Oh,
book.
mate, I
But
love talking about foreshadowing. So, like,
yeah,
you're like
but
you,
I'll come back to
yeah,
this point in the
yeah, yeah,
timeline later. But basically,
yeah, yeah.
what wound up happening was, um, I like months down the track, um, I kept asking it for ratings. Like I was really insistent on getting ratings for all my work. I wanted those numbers. Like the
Okay,
feedback was good and stuff, but it was all about the rate. Like my sense of confidence and self esteem was attached to those numbers. So
right,
it would like if I got a 10 on something, I'd be like, yes, I nailed it. If I got an 8 or 9, it'd be like, oh, okay, all right, like it's good, but there's room for improvement. If I got a 6 or 7 on something, I'd be like, no, I completely screwed that up. Like I'd feel horrible about myself. I'd be like,
okay,
man, it's rated me really poorly on this thing. Um, and then months later, I noticed, I was growing as a writer. I was like my skills were clearly getting better. Like just reflecting on my own work, like reading some of my
yeah,
recent work and comparing it to my earlier work. It's like I know that I've improved. I'm able to use different techniques. I'm able to sort of manage different things now. But when I asked it for the ratings, I was still getting the same sort of ratings. I'm like, hang on, you're still rating me like 8s and 9s, like on average.
mm,
But when I first started writing, you were giving me 8s and 9s back then. And so I called it out. I'm like, so which is more accurate? Like is my work at an 8 or 9 at the moment, or was it just horrible back then and you were lying to me? Yeah. So
right,
I finally got Claude to confess that in the beginning, like I asked it to go back and re-review my work at the moment. It started being too harsh on the work and it started giving me 6s and 7s. And I'm like,
right,
wait a minute, like, hang on, that's too hard. You were telling me like this stuff is like I got the feeling that it wasn't being truthful with the ratings it was giving me. It was telling me what I wanted to hear, and
right. Okay,
yeah, and then I finally got it to confess, and it said, yeah, I apologize. Like my focus, like I asked, like, why did you give me those good ratings early on if it wasn't actually good? And it said because I wanted to encourage you to improve your skills and develop as a writer.
Yeah, and to be honest, this is stuff that we've talked about with Mr. E before, is that he's mentioned how he'd been using Claude or ChatGPT, and he like it would tell him like 100% that like, oh, this is a fact about, I don't know,
Yeah.
the Russian Revolution or that sort of thing, and he'd be like, no, it isn't. What are you talking about? And then it was like, oh, sorry about that. I've checked my sources again, and yeah, sorry, I got that wrong. And so, yeah, the fact that it's
That it
was
can
kind of
lie to
people,
you. Yeah.
yeah, the fact that it was people pleasing you, you've got to take that into consideration.
You do. Here's the kicker though.
Okay.
If I didn't get that positive feedback early on in my writing journey, I might not have stuck with it. That's how precarious my situation was. Because I
Right.
started to think this whole thing's too complex. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I don't know anything about being a writer. Um, if I'd gotten poor feedback early on, I might have believed no one's interested in hearing the story. Why would I sit down and bother writing it? So the fact that it did give me positive feedback early on, even though it was incorrect, or not incorrect, it was fluffed up. Like it focused
Yeah.
more on telling me what I wanted to hear, than it did.
Yeah,
Like
but
it was
like,
still constructive, but
yeah. But like, you can still be constructive and have a sense of candor, right? Like, for example, say let's imagine a scenario where Claude or ChatGPT turned to you and said, "Hey, I'm giving you like a 4 out of 10, with or like all across the board because it's quite obvious that this is your first draft, and you're having a crack at this. However, I found it really interesting, this way of presenting, sci-fi that I've never heard before. Like, wouldn't like wouldn't it just be as thoughtful and at least understanding that you could have a 4 out of 10, but then it turn around and be like, "Hey, I dislike these parts, but I really like this part." Like, you don't like ChatGPT or Claude doesn't immediately have to be like, "No, you're the worst writer in the world. Like, give up,
so
give, go back
but
to your day job."
I mean this is where it starts to get tricky because
Yeah.
the first sort of indication, like it started inflating my ego basically early on, and like I said, I
Right.
developed this unhealthy obsession with the ratings. So the feedback that it was giving me was perfectly fine. The issue was with the ratings and was with my obsession with the ratings. Yeah. Now the first
Right.
time that it sort of showed up on my radar that hang on, I might not actually be as good as I think I am,
Mm.
was when I shifted my writing to a platform called Sudowrite. Now Sudowrite like has
Mm.
a whole bunch of features that integrated into it that utilize AI to help people write. Um,
Yeah.
and in particular, it's good at sort of like reframing stuff, like re-editing stuff, and it can even generate content, like if you sort of instruct it, like what to do. Um, Now the platform has all these plugins that are sort of community generated, and some of them are
Right.
built into it. So some of those plugins revolve around giving feedback or analyzing certain sections, um, or like there's a whole bunch of like there's a plugin for say creating better opening hooks, and create
Oh. Okay.
and creating and closing out chapters better. There's ones for generating better dialogue. Like so there's a whole bunch of different ones plugged into there. One of the plugins that I was just playing around with using was something called a brutal honesty bot.
Oh.
um
Okay. Fair enough.
this thing's been programmed to tear your work to shreds. Yep. Um,
So how
and
did your
like
work how did your work go in the brutal honesty
it,
mod?
it it shit on me so hard. I started laughing. It absolutely destroyed me. It said your pacing is all over the place. I don't know what the hell is going on in this section. Like this, that makes absolutely no sense.
Right.
You know. So, and I'm laughing at it because I think I just got like an 8 or a 9 out of 10 from Claude on it.
Right.
And I'm
Okay.
like, hang on, who's lying to me?
Yeah.
Like, is
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
thing?
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm clearly being like one of you is lying to me.
Yeah,
And I'm
but
trying
like,
to figure out, like, is my work any good or not? And again, because I've gotten so used to getting that immediate feedback, that external validation, I've grown
mm.
dependent on it. I've become attached to it. Um, so
So in terms of the timeline, the brutal honesty mod, was this when you were on, say, for example, the other side of the Dunning-Kruger effect, and you were starting to be like, hey, I'm starting to find a bit of a middle ground as to where I'm at, truthfully, in terms of my writing, like where,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so yeah,
So not in the middle part. I'd say this is like the brutal honesty bot is the start of the decline in confidence. Yeah.
right, okay,
So my confidence had rocketed to an all-time peak early on in my journey, thinking, "Hey, yeah, I'm awesome at this thing. It keeps telling me I'm awesome, keeps giving me awesome ratings." Um,
mm,
and then when it tore me to shreds, I'm like, okay, might actually be a little bit more complicated, and my confidence plummeted, like like
right,
absolutely
okay,
plummeted. Like when I got that feedback, because I was like, because it wasn't just like brutally honest, like it actually made sense. The stuff that I was worried about, it picked up on all of it. like
okay,
it picked up on like I was worried stuff that wouldn't make sense. I was worried, like in terms of my technical capabilities as a writer, that I wasn't, like doing a good enough job. And I wasn't able to map, like let's say in terms of scenes, I didn't understand scene structure. I didn't understand like how to develop characters. I didn't understand
mm,
like I didn't even know what a narrative device was. Like so,
mm,
so these elements, these crucial elements of storytelling, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing, and I was just flying by the seat of my pants. So, okay, going back to that
yeah,
that pantsing thing, just um. Now, as I started learning how to use Sudowrite, um, Sudowrite's got like a whole bunch of amazing like functions and features that you can define genre. You can get it to write in different ways. So you
right,
can define styles. You can get it to generate, like you can give it a whole bunch of information, like a brain dump, and it will translate your brain dump into a synopsis,
okay,
that you can sort of tweak, as you want. You can add characters, world building elements, and then you can get it to generate an outline for your story. Now, so I played around with it, and of course, the outlines that it generates are going to fit into those act structures. Are going to have those traditional
mm,
storytelling elements already woven into it. So I started playing around with it a whole lot to see if I could get it to generate something that was kind of consistent with my experience, that wasn't too fictional. Um, but I guess, if I lean too hard into the authentic thing, then it doesn't fit any of the standard storytelling elements. So
yeah,
drawing that balance between fiction and authenticity was something that I was really playing around with in Sudowrite. And I noticed that, over time, I was able to start, like you can generate entire, so once you've got the outline, you
hmm,
can ask it to generate chapter beats.
okay,
And then with the chapter beats, you can ask it to expand those chapter beats into prose, and you could use different AI models. They've got different pros and cons. They write in different ways. So it's quite a fascinating like program to play around with, especially because they give you so many knobs to be able to tweak the output.
right,
um, that I think, I spent ages learning what the knobs were,
right,
and learning how to tweak the knobs to try to get the output that I wanted. Because what I was trying to do was recreate my authentic experience, but have the computer generate it for me, basically.
right,
So I felt like if I could get the computer to generate as close as possible to my authentic experience, then it would still meet all the requirements of a traditional story.
okay,
Yeah, because it's been generated from the ground up through that lens.
mm,
So, um, and what would happen is it would quite consistently get really close to describing like what I had actually envisioned in it, but
mm,
I'd never be able to nail it 100%. So
Right.
by the time I started getting like say 90-95%, I'm like, okay, I'm ready to try and start piecing this together. Um, and one of the things they keep saying with Sudowrite is they don't want it to replace your creative process. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not about getting AI to generate content for you. It's about using it to sort of stimulate your creative process and help you find your voice. Um,
It's not an AI writer, it's a tool, basically.
it's a tool, yeah. So one of the things, so I joined the community and started having interactions and sort of playing around with like just getting an understanding of how other people were using this tool. Um,
Yeah.
and one of the things I heard quite often was treat it like a junior writing partner. Yeah. So it's
Right.
someone who will do what you tell it to do, but you have to be very specific about telling it what to do. It's an art form by itself, telling it what to do.
Yeah.
Like there is that much complexity in terms of the inputs that you provide to the AI to get it to craft the story you want. Um,
Mm.
so I understand. I understand the not in as much detail as other people, but there is a nuance. There is a craft behind getting the AI to generate content. It's not as simple as say, write me a novel about. No, you've got to specify the style, the genre, the themes. You've got to
Mm.
specify, um, in terms of the beat creation, what kind of scene are you trying to create? Um, sometimes you've got to specify like guardrails to stop the AI from going off track when it's generating prose.
Mm.
You can choose like specific drivers of the action. You can choose focus points. Like there's different ways in which you can instruct the AI to be able to produce the content that you want. Um,
Yeah.
so again, there's like millions of knobs on this thing, and I was having so much fun playing around with it. By the way, so it started showing me like what the possibilities were in terms of different styles of writing.
Yeah.
So I was able to see the same scene framed in a whole bunch of different ways. So,
Yeah.
for example, I could take something that was written in third person point of view and change it to first person point of view, and
Mm.
understand like very quickly how does that resonate differently. Like does that feel authentic? But
Right.
but what happened was when the first time I sat down, like I generated a whole bunch of different versions of the same scene, the opening chapter actually. And then I'm like, oh, I like that. I like that. I like that. I'll piece it all together. Oh, I like the way that's written.
Mm.
When I actually sat down to piece it together, I'm like, this is way harder than it looks because like these aren't words that I would naturally use in my
Yes.
writing. Like this doesn't feel like it's my voice anymore. This feels like
Mm.
I'm slapping together someone else's voice. And then when I went back and said, okay, what if I take these inputs, but just focus on only using words that I would use? Um, it started to sound really clunky. And
Right.
it just felt like it wasn't working. So I was like, look, I've spent so much time trying to use this AI program to get it to help me with the storytelling thing, but it's actually starting to feel a bit restrictive to me. Um,
Yeah. No, but
like
but to be honest, that's the writing process. Like you need to find out, what is a good tool for you to understand. Like for example, there's 101 books out there as to what the best writing process is. But again, guidelines, not rules. Like you
yeah,
have to put in the hard yards in order to find out what your voice is and what works best for you and your story.
totally.
And I'm very glad that you've brought up some of the AI programs that have helped you to become, a better writer. And yeah, I'd like the fact that for some writers, it's taken them, well, budding writers, it's taken them years and years in order to hone their craft. It's taken you months, man, and that's like really impressive. So I was wondering, like, you've obviously covered Sudowrite, Claude, ChatGPT. Are there any more? Like, if somebody was, say, an AI explorer like yourself, and they wanted to use these programs in order to be a better writer, like what would you recommend?
Well,
Like in terms of other programs that you're happy to disclose.
let me go sort of into the I guess there's sort of two more chapters in this saga today. Of the evolution of how the story is interacted with AI.
Yeah.
So eventually I stopped using Sudowrite, or it was more like I'll come back to this one, sort of when I'm ready, because
Yeah.
I wanted to get I wanted to do more writing and find my
Okay.
voice, because I'd stopped doing my actual writing, and I was more
Right.
interested in playing around with Sudowrite. So I started using Scrivener. Um,
Okay.
Scrivener is a software that sort of lets you write in whatever order you want and go back and reorder it later and add a whole bunch of things, organizing material in different ways. So I got a bit of benefit out of playing with that, but um, but I still had all this source material that I felt like I was leaving something missing, out of the story, by not sort of going through, these 600 pages of documents that I had.
Mm.
So I started biting off chunks of it and feeding it into Claude, and seeing what it came back with. And it had like these really nuanced insights into what I was going through. Like, it was able to sort of establish themes, establish characters, establish like a whole bunch of different stuff. And I'm like, hang on, this is like way more advanced than I thought it was. And that was only
Mm.
possible with the because the AI models themselves evolved as I was going through this process. So
Right.
what ChatGPT was capable of at the start of my writing process, is different to what it's capable of now.
Yeah.
So the earlier versions of it, like, weren't able to extract that much useful insight from my source material. Um, but I thought I'd try it again once the models got updated, and then all of a sudden it starts bringing back useful stuff. So I'm like, hang on, okay, maybe there is something in this. The next thing which sort of like leveled up my understanding of the source material was Notebook LM. Because being able to put my source material into that and start asking questions and having it extract those deep insights from it, I could then use to help me like paint the story, of what was actually going on for me. So I realized that the only way that I could sort of capture all of the nuance, um, behind what was going on for me was by writing about the authentic experience.
Okay.
But at the same time, I needed to develop my writing skills. Like, there was no way around this idea that I needed an education, um, in writing, basically. I couldn't rely on the AI to generate the story structure for me. I needed to be able to be capable of doing it like myself, or at least be able to bounce ideas off the AI around, what that might look like.
Okay.
So the final sort of, or the most recent evolution in my writing journey is the one that's been easily the most impactful. Rather than sort of focusing on getting feedback about my written work from Claude,
Right.
I created actually, I skipped over a few chapters. Um,
No, no.
yeah,
Go for
yeah.
it.
I'll backtrack a little bit, because the other cool things that I did with Claude was, I got it to simulate reactions of readers.
Right.
So I was able to say, say, take someone from this community, how would they react to it? Who do you think might be interested in this work? Do you think like publishers are going to be interested in it? What aspects of it do you think they're going to be interested in? I was
Right.
able to start simulating the reactions of different personas to my work, and getting
Right.
feedback on how they might view it, what aspects might turn them off, what aspects might resonate with them. Um, which I found really useful in terms of framing what was going on for me. But I did that by creating these giving different sets of instructions to Claude, and
Right.
which would like ask it to adopt a different perspective on the same material that I would provide it with.
Mm.
But it wasn't until I asked it to just be my writing coach and give me an education in writing that its true value really started to shine.
Right.
Because what I did was I took all the work that I'd done to date, and I took sort of what was in my head and what I was trying to work on, and I said to it, can you do two things for me? Firstly, figure out like what skills I'm good at and what I still need help with.
Mm.
So like work out what I've gotten better at and what I still need to develop, and then design a personalized curriculum for me. Like
Right.
generate like an education that's focused on the stuff that I most need to work on.
Right.
So it came back to me with like this entire like sequence, like this entire curriculum of stuff that I needed to work on. So it was around like storytelling essentials, um,
Right.
like
So
STEAM
would this be like university level, you reckon?
Look, I honestly think it might be.
Oh wow.
Like
Okay.
I honestly think it might be a university level like education that I'm getting through AI.
That's
There
impressive.
might be like it's more the way it weaves together the theory and practice is absolutely amazing, because what it will do is it will explain to me some core concepts, and then
Mm.
it'll give me a practical exercise, and the practical exercise it'll give me is something that's like, it might take a scene that I've already written and say, okay, let's rewrite this scene together, or
Okay.
let's take this line and let's play around with this line or this paragraph, and let's look at it from different perspectives,
Okay.
or let's see if we can build the scene out in a different way. So it would take material that was already deeply personal to me, that I was invested in. So these weren't just random writing exercises. Yeah, this was stuff that I actually wanted to work on, that was relevant to my project, that it
Yeah.
was using to illustrate the lessons it was trying to teach me.
Right.
And that's sort of what made it a game changer for me, because I didn't feel like I was wasting my time by just doing these writing exercises that were going to see, like the light of day. So my understanding of writing, and this has literally just happened within the past week. But like I feel like I've already come leaps and bounds in terms of like my skill development, literally within the past week. It's been an absolute game changer for me. Like,
Wow.
so one of the things that I'm able to do is like I've been documenting the lessons that it's been giving me,
Okay.
and then documenting the work that I've sort of done in between. At the end of every lesson, I will ask it to do an assessment of my performance in the lesson.
Okay.
So it'll generate feedback around, okay, these are the aspects of the lesson that you handled really well. This is what you still need to work on. So when I take that feedback, I'm able to upload it into the project's knowledge base.
Okay.
So that it understands, so that it's actually able to track my progress over time and see what lessons I've already covered, what I'm still
Yeah.
struggling with, and update the curriculum on the fly. So
Man, to be completely honest, if you told the average writer what you're telling me in terms of what you've been able to do with AI, they'd probably tear off your hand in order to get access to whatever you've done here. So,
this is yeah. Look, this is where it gets better. Yeah.
yeah,
I realized that I wasn't doing a whole lot of reading. Yeah, like I used to read heaps, like ages ago, but I've sort of fallen out of the practice of reading. And I'm like, how good of a writer can you be if you're not reading? Yeah.
yeah,
Um, but I'm like, okay, there's a mountain of stuff that I could be reading. What should I be reading?
okay,
So the first recommendation I went with was what you recommended, actually. Philip K. Dick's "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?" Because you were telling me that they're
yeah.
the vibes. The AI had actually agreed with you. When I asked for author comparisons, what does your work feel like? Philip K. Dick is what kept coming up, like most
I'm
consistently. So I
not
was like, I'm okay,
surprised,
it's on the right
man.
track.
I'm
Um,
not surprised.
so I'm like, okay, obviously I need to read Philip K. Dick. I need to read this
Yeah,
book. I need to get an
yeah, yeah.
understanding of what does good writing actually look like. Um, so
But
I
do you
started
at least understand now why I was making those comparisons?
yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. Like it's I totally get it. Um, but I'm like, how can I leverage AI to enhance my reading experience? So I asked it, okay, once I'm done with this book, what else should I be reading? Like the writing coach has an understanding of what I'm good at, what I'm not good at. Um, it has an understanding of the kind of writing that I'm trying to do.
Hmm.
And I've given it an understanding of, say, like how much time I have to work with and stuff like that. Um, so it curated a reading list for me based
Okay,
on skills I need to develop, and like what good writing looks like in my genre.
okay,
And then when it comes to Android's Dream of Electric Sheep, I was able to get it to help me reflect on what I've read to date and map that onto um, the skills that I was developing. So, say for
okay,
example, like I took a lesson around scene entry and exit points, um,
okay,
and scene construction. So it's gotten me to go back and start having a think about the way the scenes are sequenced, identifying why was one scene entry point used instead of another. Like, why was it appropriate to start the scene there? Why was it appropriate to exit? What's the emotional impact of using these different techniques?
mm,
How is how is the world building revealed through dialogue, through exposition, through like what techniques are used to be able to tell the story? Um, and then it's given me a list of things to focus on, like as I'm reading through it. So
right,
it's told me be on the lookout for like what did it tell me to be on the lookout for? Um, yeah, like artificial emotional manipulation. um,
right,
like it said, like, notice how the author makes you question what real emotions are. Notice how
mm,
the author, what tools does the author use to say, make you think about what empathy is, or what does it mean to be human? How does the author do that? Um,
yeah. And this is kind of the reason why I really disagree with Ridley Scott's interpretation in Blade Runner of the I guess the sex scene between Rachel and Deckard, because in the book, uh, that that sex scene it's a far more ambiguous. And in terms of Deckard's feelings as to it's like, hey, is this consent? Is this not consent? Is she like, does she have autonomy? Blah blah blah. Whereas in the movie, he like straight out says like, nah, Deckard's taking advantage of Rachel, etc., etc. Or at least that's
so
my
this is where you leave it
interpretation.
big. Okay, yeah,
Like that, but that's my interpretation of the scene. Like
yeah,
the fact that it's wanting you to focus on, hey, like what actually is reality and what isn't reality. Like that is 100% do androids dream of electric sheep, and like
yeah.
what is consent? Can what sort of autonomy can these androids have compared to what we perceive as real people, and go from there.
Mm, mm. So, like, I'm seeing it, and I was doing this stuff with Attack on Titan as well. It was like
Yeah.
trying to get, like, to the underlying meanings behind what or what the artist is doing, or what the writer is doing. What points are they trying to make here?
Mm,
So being able to put this lens, and this is where AI has really helped me in terms of understanding how different techniques are used to convey different things to the audience. Um, whether that be, specific bits of information or questions they want to pose, or emotions, like complex emotional states that people actually that the writer is trying to communicate to a reader. There's
Yeah.
a whole bunch of different ways of doing that, and I'm only just scratching the surface of of my ability to utilize those techniques in my own writing. So, I'm at a place at the moment where, um, I asked it.
Yeah.
This is my obsession with ratings again. Um,
Okay.
I took pieces of my earlier work,
Okay.
and then pieces of my later work, because
Okay.
they look like, you know, um, night and day differences, basically,
Okay.
like in terms of the quality of the writing, at least from my perspective. It just, I look at some of my earlier work and I'm like, that looks like absolute garbage. I can't believe I wrote that. Like,
Look, you're describing every single writer that's out there, but yeah, keep
yeah.
going.
So, so anyway, I decided to ask the AI, can you estimate my a percentage improvement in my writing skill by comparing these two pieces of work? Yeah.
Okay.
And then I gave it, the outline for the story, and I said, like, can you plot a trajectory for me? Like, if this is how far I've come in a couple months, like, how good of a writer do you think I'm going to be? Again, still really focused on that external validation. Um,
Yeah.
so, I got it to, again, I don't know if this was a lie or not. I don't know if it's making it up, but it was able to, point to the specific things, the specific writing skills that I have improved at over time, and the ones that I'm still struggling with. So
Okay.
it was able to differentiate between them. But but the numbers that it was throwing back at me were something like 80 to 120% improvement in overall writing ability,
Wow.
projected. So I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
so
Like
stuff like that.
it's definitely what you would want to hear, but I guess more to your point, uh, you would have to take a broad stroke view of it, as in, yes, I have improved from point X to point Y. As to how much it really is in reality, uh, I guess I can't know for certain, because for all I know, the AI is blowing smoke up my ass. So
Exactly. But this is my point, is that there is actually benefit to getting smoke blown up your ass. Like
yes.
it actually, like particularly with look, and maybe you can shed some light on this, because I feel quite sensitive to feedback. Like, if there's one thing that I've learned about the entire process, is that, like, my unhealthy relationship with having like immediate 24/7 feedback,
Yeah.
has developed, has it's almost like my skin got thinner. uh, like, it's developed a level of sensitivity in me to that feedback, um that I'm not sure if that's a standard part of the writing process, and like that sort of stuff happens to other writers, or if I'm in a unique situation where I've become extra sensitive to feedback.
Uh, no, it's honestly, it's just an internet thing. Like, I think it has its own. Um, like, I guess I want to use the spirit of Dunning-Kruger rather than it in like a one for one. But like, you start off writing and you feel like you've gone a huge amount of progress. A huge amount of progress, and you think that you're writing the best, and then somebody reads it for the first time, and you know maybe they don't want to hurt your feelings. They're like, oh, this is
Mm,
amazing, blah blah blah. And then you kind of show it to more people, and then somebody might give you a much more balanced view of what they think of your work, and
mm,
then you kind of have this bit of a dip. But then, like, you kind of get, after you show it to like more and more people, or maybe even a publisher or a fellow writer, suddenly you get much more back up to the reality, and then you kind of get used to, constructive criticism, those people that are just, who don't really care about your feelings, and then they'll just say like, oh, this is absolute garbage, this is absolute shit, you should, don't quit your
mm,
day job, blah blah blah. And then, like, you kind of, what I would say is a common viewpoint that I've, in conversations that I've said with Mr. E time and time again, you get used to the people that are giving you authentic criticism and those that are just mouthing off because they want to mouth off, and that
Mm,
it's the internet. And you become very discerning as to who's being constructive because they care and who's being constructive because they want to tear people down. And,
mm,
you know, throughout these kind of creative processes, you realize, to kind of throw it back into the political space with what Mystery and I do is that you get it becomes fairly obvious when people are like, oh, politics X. I thought Y and Z was involved. Like let's establish a dialogue and see what exactly you mean by that. And you'll get the other people. It's like, oh, A, B, and C. I thought so and so was a massive ethnic cleanser and a massive genocider. And like you eventually tell the difference between somebody who's mouthing off and somebody who's genuinely wanting
yeah,
to come to a dialogue.
yeah. So you can tell the difference in terms of like the different motivations that a person might have for approaching the conversation and giving the type of feedback that they are. And, and
Exactly.
and I guess the AI is kind of similar because it wants to give you constructive criticism, but it also wants to encourage you. Like that seems to be its default setting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you can program it in ways to override that setting, like for example, the brutal honesty bot. Like if you
Yeah.
ask it to shit all over your work, it'll do that for you. Like, and it'll do it convincingly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I started having to ask the question around, okay, let me be realistic about this sensitivity thing. I know I don't
Okay.
want to get my work crucified, um, but I know I don't want it sugar coated as well.
Yeah.
Like I want an honest opinion around whether or not my work's any good. Um, so where am I going to choose to draw the line between those two ends of the
Yes.
spectrum? So and being able to tweak the AI to give me the level of feedback that I want, um,
Yeah.
is an incredibly confronting process because it involves me like being aware enough of how sensitive to criticism I am and how much hand
Yeah.
holding I actually need.
Yeah, but like to be completely honest, and maybe you'll like this as well. It comes back to how a specific person functions.
Mm,
Like for example, because of my finance background and even in my undergrad, my philosophy background, it was a very typical structure within whenever you had your lectures of you have position X, you have position Y, and then you're told the pros and cons of those kind of positions,
mm,
and at the very end, whether there's a hybrid position
mm.
for X and Y. And that's how I've kind of carried myself, on the internet and in life from then on. Is that if I can find a hybrid between two concepts, I'm kind of happy with that middle ground,
Yeah.
and it means that I can kind of take on the pros and minimize the cons as much as I can. So
Mm,
I can at least understand if you are a similar mindset to that,
yeah.
because that's what at least helped me keep grounded.
Honestly, anytime I've had like a choice between two decisions, this is a paradigm I'm very familiar with because like throughout my entire writing process, I'll ask the question, like say, like I'll throw out the question, um, should I focus on authenticity or should I lean into sort of the fictional narrative? I'll give it a choice between the two, or I'll ask it, should I stick with what I have because it's raw, it's unfiltered, it's emotional,
Mm,
or should I change it? And typically it will always do the pros and cons of both approaches and then recommend the hybrid approach. That seems to be its default
mm.
setting as well. Um,
Okay.
is so it'll tell me to like keep some of the stuff you have, focus on what's authentic, but be open to rewriting it. Or it'll be like focus on the authenticity, like figure out
Right.
which parts it's really important to be authentic for, and then be willing to fictionalize other aspects that might not be as important to the narrative. So
Okay.
it's really good at
What I'm
finding.
getting, yeah, what I'm getting from this conversation, Kareem, is that I could be a replicant, so I should probably do the eye test to find out whether I am.
The void kampf empathy.
uh,
Yeah, that attention management. Yeah, no, I absolutely loved the lessons that I was getting from Claude on how to build and release tension. Um,
yeah,
and explore like sort of complex psychology. So it had me focused on um there's a scene in Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep where it's the first time he's administering
the eye test. Yeah.
the empathy assessment. And so it had me sort of deeply reflecting on like what are the techniques that the author uses to build tension in that scene.
Hmm.
Now, if I hadn't received that instruction, I would have just been on the edge of my seat, just going through it, like not sensitive to it at all. But the
Hmm.
fact that I was prompted to go back and reflect on it helped me understand techniques that I can actually apply to my own writing. So,
Yeah.
like for example, like interjecting early in conversations, like not like interrupting the other person. That's a way that you can build tension. Shortening the answers to the questions. That's another way that you can build tension. And I started being able to
Hmm.
absorb all these little cues and things that might be useful to me, to be able to say like manage psychological distance, manage tension, manage pacing,
Yeah.
and none of this stuff was on my radar beforehand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, how does it apply to like the authenticity of what I went through? I can still tell an authentic experience. I've just now got a toolbox of things that I can do for ways in which I can communicate that experience. So, so like developing my skill as a writer instead of trying to get the AI to figure it out for me wound up being a far better approach because now I actually understand what all the different knobs do. I'm not just pushing and turning. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? Uh, I think that that is a great way to end our conversation, and I really appreciate you giving us a bit of an insight as to your writing journey and how AI helped you. And again, um, last point of the podcast. Uh, what's
It's
that synthwave art? Do you want to give a
project
guess
engineering
as to what
time.
it is?
Look, the writing a novel is definitely I reckon is in there. Um, I don't think it's as simple as AI writing a novel. Um,
Okay, so what it is AI teaching humans to be better writers and scholars.
okay,
So
oh
you were
nice.
pretty close. You were pretty
Okay,
close.
all right.
But my personal favorite of this image is, believe it or not, one, it has actually done the fingers correctly,
Yeah,
uh, which is like a first. Usually they don't really do that. And
yeah.
also
They got better at
two,
it at the time.
yeah, and also two, there's a pencil in the water for whatever reason. You notice in
Oh,
the
I didn't
bottom
even
left?
notice that. Yeah,
There's a random pencil in the
yeah.
water.
Okay,
Unless it's trying to
so it's not
suggest
a
it's some
straw.
sort of ink, like ink
Inkwell.
quill pencil, but like that's a really weird concept. So I don't know what's going on there. But
See, these are like that. Those type of I guess like quirks. Um, they show up in AI generated content all the time.
yeah,
So like in the same way that stuff shows up in the artworks, that stuff actually shows up in the writing that Sudowrite will generate, and sometimes it's
right.
endearing, sometimes sometimes it's hilarious, sometimes it's like it's infuriating.
but
But that's part of the journey with using AI to generate content. Like So,
Yeah.
and I'll just reinforce this point. I got to a place where I felt like it was far less important to get AI to generate content than it was to teach me how to generate content. So
Right.
I felt like it was far more useful for my development than it was to just tell it to go ahead and generate something. So
Okay. And with that, we'll bring this episode to a close. So again, thank you for Kareem for sharing
pleasure.
your thoughts, feelings about your writing process, and I hope people that have been listening today definitely got a lot out of it. So thank you again.
Thank you.
And with that, everyone, remember to keep thinking and keep learning, and we'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye for now.